Hello and welcome, everyone. I love the history of colonial America and the American Revolution, and I have found much inspiration in the leading figures of that time. Great men such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, John Hancock, Sam Adams, Paul Revere, Patrick Henry, Nathan Hale, and many more. So when I learned the Money Metals Exchange sells a generic silver round that bears the likeness of Paul Revere, he of the famed Paul Revere's ride, I knew I had to add some of those to my stack. So let's take a look at Paul Revere, his midnight ride, and the Paul Revere silver round from the Money Metals Exchange. Paul Revere was a leading patriot and a prominent silversmith and engraver in Boston in the lead up to the American Revolution and for many years afterwards. The fact that he was a silversmith should warm the hearts of silver stackers everywhere. Revere learned the silversmithing trade from his father, who owned a silver shop that Paul would inherit at a very young age. Silversmithing would be the foundation of his business, although he also worked with copper and had a lucrative engraving business as well. In fact, his famous engraving of the Boston Massacre, titled The Bloody Massacre, perpetuated in King Street, Boston on March 5th, 1770, helped elevate tensions between the colonists and the British government. 5 years later, in the early hours of April 19, 1775, a large body of British Army regulars in Boston were ordered to march out to Lexington to arrest John Hancock and Sam Adams, who were seen as the ringleaders of the growing opposition to the British government. The soldiers were then to proceed to Concord to seize munitions that were reported to be stored there. The plans, of course, were foiled by an alert system that had been put in place by the Patriots. When the British troop movements were detected, 2 alert riders were dispatched to warn Lexington and Concord, Paul Revere and Willaim Dawes. They successfully warned Adams and Hancock in Lexington and then proceeded on toward Concord, now joined by a 3rd rider, Samuel Prescott. On the road to Concord, the 3 men were stopped by a British Army patrol. Prescott managed to escape and successfully made it to Concord, but Dawes and Revere were unable to complete their ride. The British soldiers took Revere's horse, so he had to walk back to Lexington, and he arrived in town at the break of day just as the first battle of the Revolution was underway. Now, the British failed in their objectives that day. 1, they did not capture Hancock and Adams, who escaped. And 2, they did not find any munitions in Concord. Moreover, the British were repeatedly attacked along the road all the way back to Boston by militiamen who were arriving on the scene from all over the countryside. The British were enraged by the losses they suffered that day. 250 men killed and wounded, and also by the irregular fighting tactics of the militiamen. Now, Revere, as we discussed, was not the only rider that night. In addition to Dawes and Prescott, as the news spread, more and more riders spread out across the countryside, perhaps as many as 40 in all, according to historians. So why is it that most Americans have heard of Paul Revere, but not of Dawes or Prescott or any of the other riders? Well, one simple reason. In 1861, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a poem about the ride that focused on Revere to the neglect of the others. And with that poem, Paul Revere became a legend. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land, and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. And it's a longer poem, so I'm going to skip the middle and skip down to the last two stanzas. If you'll bear with me for just a second. It finishes up as follows. You know the rest. In the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball, from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again, under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm, to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear. A voice in the darkness and knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on that night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Now, Paul Revere, the father of 16 children, died many years after the event of that night, on May 10th, 1818, at his home in Boston. He was 83 years old. He is buried in the Granary Burial Ground in the heart of Boston City. I had the chance in the last couple years to visit Lexington, Concord, and Boston. These places are an American history lover's dream, and along with Philadelphia, mark the geographical birthplace of the United States of America. My visits, to say the least, were fantastic. Now, as far as coins or rounds go, there's not much out there when it comes to Paul Revere. The only significant item I came across was a Paul Revere medal that was issued as part of the bicentennial in the mid-1970s. There was a bicentennial commemorative medal series that was issued. The medals were issued both in silver and bronze. Here is an image of the silver medal, which also, on the opposite side, commemorates the battles of Lexington and Concord. There were 212,512 of these silver medals minted. Now, I've looked into the silver content of these medals, and that apparently is a matter of some debate. There doesn't seem to be any official source of information out there that would confirm what the silver content is. The speculation online does seem to range from either 90% silver or to 0.925 sterling. So it looks like that's a little bit up in the air. So let us turn to the silver Paul Revere round sold by Money Metals Exchange. I have 6 of them, as you can see there on the table. Part of me thinks it might be fun to add 7 more so that I'd have 13 of them to symbolize the 13 colonies that became the 13 states of the Union. But that's something for the future. Anyways, so here is one of the rounds. Let's bring it up to the camera. Let's start with the back side, or maybe it's the front side. And as you can see there, it's a half an ounce of 0.999 fine silver from the Money Metals Exchange, and that's the Money Metals Exchange logo there. And it's clean, simple, nice. I do like this side of the coin. And then on the other side of the coin, we have the Paul Revere image. Let's move this to the center there. Okay. So Paul Revere's ride, 1775. You have the image of him on the horse. You have the church steeple in the background where they put up the lanterns. So the moment I saw this image, I immediately liked it. I immediately decided I had to have it. And here we are. Okay. So let me put that back down. Now, one of the things I like about the Money Metals Exchange is that they include a descriptive insert with their coins or rounds when you buy them. Or at least they've done so for the items I have ordered so far. So for this one, this came with a little certificate of authenticity, and then on the inside, it has a little description of the coin. And for this Paul Revere silver round, it says the following. Money Metals Exchange commissioned its proprietary .999 fine silver round commemorating Paul Revere's ride to provide a tool for citizens to protect against the collapse of the dollar's purchasing power and to help reinvigorate the symbols of liberty upon which the nation was founded. Our silver rounds are not legal tender and do not purport to be numismatic items. They are simply a more cost-effective way to accumulate silver ounces than most other options. In addition to his extraordinary contributions to the American Revolution, Paul Revere was a prolific and highly skilled Boston silversmith who spent much of his life working with precious metals. Paul Revere's dedication to silver, as well as his key role as a citizen/patriot devoted to liberty, gives special meaning to this spectacular silver round. And then the second piece of this says about the design. Paul Revere's midnight ride on April 18th, 1775. Paul Revere made his famous midnight ride from Charleston to Lexington to warn his fellow colonists of the approach of British troops marching in their direction. Joined by Willaim Dawes and Samuel Prescott, he set out to give early warning to colonial resistance leaders John Adams and John Hancock of the British intention to arrest them and seize their weapons stores. Now the spirit of Paul Revere rides once again to alert today's citizens and patriots to prepare for new dangers presented by our own government's anti-freedom policies. It is only fitting that Paul Revere's return comes in the form of a pure silver round issued by the Money Metals Exchange. Each silver round is branded in the Money Metals Exchange name and stamped with its guaranteed weight of 1/2 troy ounce of .999 fine silver. Okay, so as it notes, these rounds are 1/2 ounce rounds, and I know many stackers do not like fractional silver rounds due to the higher premiums and tend to prefer the constitutional or junk silver when it comes to fractional silver purposes. But hey, I couldn't help it. After all, these rounds have Paul Revere on them. All right, folks, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. I do humbly ask that you hit the subscribe button as well. Every subscription helps me out. And please let me know your thoughts on the video or the subject matter covered in the video in the comments section. Until next time, so long.